Hey, welcome to this week's edition of Confessions of a CX Executive. I'm your host, JP Dumas. As you know, I've spent the last 2 decades working with a number of big brands you may have heard of, focusing on elevating customer operations and contact center. Today, I'm also a principal at CX and Growth Strategies, as well as a partner at CX on the Rocks Collective, where we focus on companies helping them to elevate their sales, customer retention, and of course, employee experience. So, customer experience is the name of the game today. So, today's episode is a little bit different. We're going to talk about knowledge management. If you think about AI, it is writing our data so much faster. But is that data correct? Because if our knowledge isn't correct, then our customer experience will not be correct either. So I have a guest on today, Martin Hobratschk. He is a certified knowledge management expert. I think I can use that term. He'll correct me if I'm incorrect. But he's done this at companies such as IBM, Google, and Apple. He also leads Cognita, which is his latest venture, where he helps companies figure out their knowledge base. Now, for me, it's really a question of why does knowledge management matter in the age of AI? And more importantly, what is knowledge management? So without further ado, I'm going to bring on, I'll call him Marty, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his background, what knowledge management is, and we'll probably have a little bit of fun with this because you know what we do here? We have honest conversations about customer experience and why it matters to your bottom line. So, Martin, take it away. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, JP. Thanks for having me. And yes, you mentioned I've been doing knowledge management in the CX space for more than 15 years. Done it at Google and Apple and with other companies as well. And really, my focus has been, on how do we make sure that our agents and our customers have the knowledge that they need to solve their problems quickly. Because that's the name of the game when it comes to customer support. It's solving problems, right? That's what folks are looking for. And knowledge management is the key tool that you can use to make sure that happens in a hyper efficient way. And these days, as you mentioned, with AI just being everywhere, that knowledge management is even more important because with AI agents providing those solutions, you want to make sure those solutions are the right solutions, because when you provide a customer with the wrong solution, that creates an angry customer, and that creates a customer who's very likely to go find somebody else to work with, right? So that's my goal these days. It's been my goal all along, is just getting the right answers to the right people at the right time.
So let's rewind this a bit for individuals who may not be close to customer experience, but are business leaders in general. Can you tell us a little bit about what is knowledge management and how it fits within the greater ecosystem of business?
Sure. Like I mentioned, at the very basic definition is what I said. It's, getting the right answers to the right people at the right time. Knowledge management is a very broad type of practice. It has impacts on all sorts of different areas of organizational function, not just, in the CX space, but, in the operational space, in the HR space. It ties in closely with learning and development, for example. But, for the purposes of our conversation today, we'll focus on the CX space. And really, regardless of whether it's in the CX space or other space, knowledge management at its core focuses on three things. It focuses on people, it focuses on process, and it focuses on governance. You have to have attention, or not people, processes, and not people, processes, and governance, but people, processes, and systems. You have to focus on all three to really have a successful knowledge management practice within your organization. And many companies are already doing this, and they don't even know that it's called knowledge management, right? They might have a knowledge base and they've got some folks who are running it, and they might even have defined framework that they're using to do that, and they don't necessarily know that it's called knowledge management, especially if you're in kind of a smaller to more medium-sized enterprise where you're not going to necessarily have the dedicated headcount for that, right? So knowledge management, again, to me is getting people to not only find that information, but share the new answers that they've found, right? You have to include that as a part of the formula, because it's not just about going and looking at a static knowledge base. It's about empowering people to share the knowledge that they have in ways that are going to be useful to both other employees at the company, but also maybe more importantly, to the customers that you're serving.
So, I guess one way to think about it is it's almost like my internal Google, if you will. It's where do I go to get information about my company, about stuff? Like, where do we keep the knives and forks? I mean,
Yeah.
those sort of things, right?
Yeah, it totally is. It's that and more. Like I said, it touches all different aspects of a company. So it could be, the step-by-step solution to a problem, right? It could be FAQs about a new product release. It could be what's the process that I follow to request time off. It can be a whole bunch of different things that are stored in a knowledge base, right? And but even again, it extends beyond that. It extends to communities of practice. Bringing together people within an organization who work on similar types of projects, so that they can share knowledge about what they're doing with each other to make those projects more successful and more efficient. I like the analogy you made. It's like knowing where the forks and knives are, but beyond that, knowing which fork to use for which situation, right? Because you can have different kinds of forks, and a good knowledge base will tell you, oh, you use this fork for your salad, and you use this fork for your main course, right?
Yeah, so this information constantly changes in a business. I mean, this isn't static. I mean, businesses continue to evolve. So when you layer in AI, and now we're trying to do this at scale, now you have a knowledge base that needs to continue to evolve with it. So tell us a little bit about what is the risk if your knowledge management system is learning from bad information because it hasn't been updated, for example.
Yeah, that's the key concern when it comes to knowledge management and AI. With AI, it's the same thing that we've faced in the tech industry for decades, right? The old term garbage in, garbage out, right? So when you're feeding your AI system garbage, it's going to spit out garbage. It's going to give wrong information. It's going to be more likely to hallucinate. And we've already seen examples in the real world where customers have gone to companies that have a bad knowledge base behind their AI, and it gives them a wrong answer. And the customer says, well, I'm not going to use your product anymore. I'm going to go to your competitor because you didn't give me the right answer. You gave me a wrong answer. And so the risk is real. The risk is, decreased customer satisfaction, increased customer churn, because you have bad information out there. But even for your employees, it impacts employee retention, right? Because if you're arming your employees with bad information, that the AI is suggesting, oh, here's an answer, and they take that as the gospel, and they give that to a customer. Now the customer is mad at them, and then now the employee feels like, well, I'm not really supported in my job. I'm not being given the right information to do my job well. I'm going to go find someplace else where they support me, right? And so you have that employee churn as well. So that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to bad knowledge going into AI. We could probably spend hours talking about examples that we've seen where that bad knowledge has created a bad situation for a customer.
You touched on a number of things that I want to come back to: the employee experience, the customer getting incorrect information, the impact on the bottom line if that information isn't accurate. We're going to spend the next few minutes unpacking all this. But there's something that you said earlier, which I think is important. You mentioned that not everyone understands that they have this sort of process in place, or they have this thing called knowledge management.
Mm-hmm.
So if it is indeed the fuel of customer experience, Why are so many companies running on fumes at this point?
It's one of those things that it just gets ignored, especially in the CX world, especially in the contact center world, where the organization is already viewed as a cost center, right? This is the age old discussion where it's like, well, your customer support is it's just costing us money, right? It's not a revenue generating system. I think we can probably debate whether that's actually true or not, but that's how it's looked at, right? And knowledge management is, it's looked at in the same light. Well, we're just spending money on this, and we don't necessarily understand what the return on our investment is, right? And so a lot of companies may not invest in it. A lot of companies, in the conversations I've been in companies where we've actually had knowledge management function, we'll be on calls. Say, for example, we have a new product release. We'll be on calls with the product team, maybe the sales team, the customer support team is engaged, knowledge management's there, training team is there. And we say, okay, here's the new product. Here's what we need to know. And the first question comes up is, well, how are we going to train people on this? And nobody says, how are we going to share the knowledge about this, right? It's all, it goes first to training. So people understand training and training people on a new product, but they don't necessarily understand that training is just in case. You train somebody just in case they might get a question. A knowledge base and knowledge management really focuses on just in time. You're providing knowledge that somebody can access at the moment that they need it, right? And so companies that fail to recognize the difference here between the just in case and just in time will tend to struggle, right? Because you'll put a training together, people will get trained on it, and then it's a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months before they get that call about it, and now they've forgotten everything they learned in the training, and they can't go back and dig through that training and find the information, right? And it's really especially important, when you're talking about newer employees. Tenured employees will kind of have gotten things and figured them out and have a lot of stuff, kind of institutional knowledge, tribal knowledge embedded in their heads. But again, there's issues with that as well, that cause companies to not operate as efficiently, right? Because again, they're not thinking about all this institutional, this tribal knowledge and how to make sure that everybody has access to it. And so it causes them to operate much more inefficiently, to be running on fumes, right? Because they're not thinking about all of these different aspects of knowledge management that are so crucial to making the organization successful.
There's something else that you touch on there, because the notion of just in time, right, which presupposes that information not only has to be available, but it has to be digestible. Because when you reference the training example, listen, I don't have time to go through paragraphs, and neither does the customer. Like, it has to be, I like to say soundbite, mic drop, the little micro pieces where people get what they need. So that's important. Yeah. But you also talked about your tenured employees, because I want to touch on this as a question. So we're going to scale up, we're going to use AI. There's a lot of different reasons for that, right? Where we can get information faster. But what is the hidden cost to a company when those tenured employees who kind of internalize this information already walk out the door, and you're left with AI filling in the blanks? What's the cost and what's the risk to the business?
Yeah, the cost is, again, inefficiency. It is, which boils down to dollars and cents, because if you've got AI kind of creating answers and they don't have all the background detail on it, and it's just predicting what it thinks the answer should be, it could give you the wrong answer, right? And that creates, again, those problems we've mentioned before. But regardless of AI, when employees walk out the door with a bunch of knowledge, that causes everybody who's left behind to have to essentially reinvent the wheel, right? And that takes time. And they may not have all the answers. It may take them weeks or months to come across the same situation that happened before and figure out what that answer is, right? So that reinventing the wheel, and again, it's all about inefficiency and not being able to quickly solve a problem, right? And again, that all boils down to dollars and cents. Every minute, even every second that you have to take to reinvent that wheel is revenue lost or money spent.
Yeah, absolutely. So something else you touched on earlier was the trust and loyalty factor from a customer perspective. We've all seen situations where customers might get three different answers depending on what part of the organization they engage with.
Mm-hmm.
How do you address that? I mean, how do you ensure that, that information may have been correct at one point in time, or it may be correct for that business unit, but it doesn't capture the full scope of what that customer needs? How do you fix that through your knowledge base?
Right. Well, that siloization is a big problem, for most organizations. And with knowledge management, that often manifests itself in having multiple different knowledge repositories that people are using to find their answers. And there's duplicated content, often conflicting content, often out of date content in those silos. And so what I recommend to clients is to break down those silos, try to reduce them as much as possible. Look for ways to implement a single point of truth, right? How can you break it down from 5 different knowledge repositories to 1 or maybe 2 repositories that are integrated together, so that when you search for an answer, you're finding the answer in both repositories. So that's part of the solution is that discoverability and exposing that knowledge, across the organization, but in a single place to find it. The other part of the equation is how do you manage that knowledge? What is the framework that you have in place to make sure that the knowledge is being continuously refreshed, that somebody's looking at, is this knowledge past its sell-by date? Does it have an expiration date, and then we need to retire the knowledge? That have new product features or new environmental factors come into play to where we need to update the knowledge? Are there completely new issues that need to be put into our knowledge base and documented, right? And how is that all documented? How do you structure that knowledge in such a way that it is very easily consumable, not just by your human agents, but the AI agents as well? And how do you structure it so that it is consumable and usable by both without having to maintain separate repositories? And that third part of the equation is who's doing all this work? Do you have a team of tech writers who are working with subject matter experts to document things? Or, in a better solution in my view, are you putting the tools in the hands of those subject matter experts to be the ones to do that work of helping to maintain that knowledge, because they are the experts. They are the ones who know the knowledge. Why would you want to make it more inefficient by putting layers of tech writers and approvals in place? Just give them the tools to review and update and approve those new knowledge changes, right? So it's again, it's what's the system you're using? How is it structured? And who's doing the work?
Yeah. So I want to shift gears for a second, because I really want to get down to brass tacks for our leaders. You've worked across different industries. What's the one mistake that everyone keeps making with their knowledge management system?
The one mistake that everybody's making with their knowledge management system is thinking that the knowledge management system is the end goal, that implementing a knowledge base, a place where the knowledge is stored, is enough. Not thinking about the other factors that I've mentioned, not thinking about the framework that you use to govern that knowledge, and not thinking about the people who are there to help maintain and create and share that knowledge. I was working with a client one time. We were in a discovery call, and they were showing me, some screens of their knowledge bases, and they showed me one, and it was a list of articles, and it had um, first published date was listed as some of the data in the view. And this was a discovery call that we were doing at the end of last year, so the end of 2024, and the first published date on the article was 2017. And their concern was, well, why is nobody using our knowledge base? And I was like, well, there's your answer right there. This article is 7 years old. Has anybody updated that article in the 7 years? If not, then your end users are like, well, this is way out of date. I don't trust this. This isn't relevant to what I'm doing today, right? Because they were like, oh, we have this cool, shiny knowledge management system, but we really didn't think about the knowledge management ecosystem that surrounds it.
Yeah, and I think that's important because it really shines a light on, you've got to have a process to not only update information, but also archive.
Yeah.
So that there's this confidence that what you're seeing is the cutting edge and you have the right answer. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's a place where human expertise still matters, right? Because
Mhm.
you got to make that process, but you really need someone there who is part of that governance to ensure that this happens like clockwork. So,
Yep.
so you talked about earlier how companies don't always make that investment, but quite honestly, when would a company see this investment pay off?
It's not something that happens overnight. It's not like you're going to turn this on and then the next day, you've saved millions of dollars. It's something that it takes a little bit of time, a year, 2 years. So you have to have a little bit of patience to see that payoff, but you will see that payoff, right? Because, at the very, kind of base level, you're going to be driving efficiency. You're going to make it quicker for your agents to find the answers that they need. So instead of taking 5 minutes on a call, maybe they can resolve that call in 3 minutes, right? You save 2 minutes because they didn't have to spend those extra 2 minutes searching for the answer, going to a Slack group and saying, hey, I've got this customer with this really weird problem, what do I do, right? And extending that. You're going to reduce escalations because in my experience with escalations, it's usually because the person who answered the call didn't know what the answer was or wasn't empowered to provide the right information. And so by implementing a knowledge management system that captures that kind of information, you're gonna reduce the number of times that you're having to escalate an issue. And again, escalations are a cost, right? And over time, you're going to save money on reducing costs. You're going to improve how quickly agents become proficient at their job. So with onboarding and ramp up time, you can reduce that significantly. I had one client, they came to me, they recognized that they needed a knowledge base because it was taking them 14 weeks to get a new agent to a proficient level. And by proficient, that's just being able to do the job without a lot of hand-holding. And so by implementing a knowledge base, we pretty immediately were able to reduce that ramp time for the new agents from 14 weeks to 8 weeks. And that was just by implementing a knowledge base. They really didn't have a good quality training program either. So, and they've since made huge strides there. So you're saving time that agents are having to spend in training. And again, that's a cost savings. And that also helps with employee retention, right? And so that if you're supporting your agents and they have the knowledge that they need and they can find the knowledge they need and they trust the knowledge that they need, they're going to be more likely to stick in the job. They're not going to be going and leaving to find the next better job, which again, will save you money because you don't have to train up a new employee, right? They're going to be in the job, and you won't have to retrain somebody. So, these are all kind of real world types of cost savings that companies are getting every day with knowledge management. But again, it's not an overnight thing. It's something that takes a little while to become evident, because as people start using the knowledge management system, as they get better at sharing the knowledge that they have, as they get better at maintaining and updating that knowledge, it becomes more and more efficient over time. And so, you're going to see those cost savings in, a year and 2 years and 3 years. And that's going to translate into millions of dollars worth of cost savings.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you talked about earlier is you mentioned that sometimes these support roles, or these, kind of behind the scenes roles, I like to call the plumbing, are seen as costs to the business. And what you just articulated is really highlighting the things that are important to leaders and executives in the organization. And, myself being a very laser focused on revenue aspect is, how does my knowledge base help me drive revenue, retention, and reduce my cost to serve? Because that ultimately becomes the most important piece, right? And I see AI is playing an amazing role in accelerating that. So when you talk about someone going from 14 weeks to 8 weeks, well, that becomes important because, you cut that training time, by more than 50%, right? Or by 50%. When you talk about the ability to have a tenured agent stay on board, that becomes important. And so help me land the plane here. Where do you see knowledge management as a whole going in the next 3 years, particularly in the world of AI, as it becomes more data intensive, it gets smarter, and it gets hungrier?
Yeah. I think I'd like to tell people that AI is the ultimate knowledge management tool, because that's what it's all about, right? It's about, surfacing knowledge, but more than that, it's about managing knowledge. And I think KM is on the cusp of becoming one of the most important functions in an organization, and AI is going to help it become that function. Because when we talk about AI and in the CX space, usually what people are thinking about is chatbots, maybe agent assist, right? Those are kind of the big marquee types of things. But AI has the capability of helping people create and share knowledge, and not have to be necessarily a highly skilled tech writer or even knowledge management practitioner. For example, there are now AI-based knowledge management tools that will look at case notes. They will look at transcripts from chats or from phone calls, and it will look at the existing knowledge base, and it will help organizations discover, hey, you have a knowledge gap. You don't have this solution documented. Here's a recommendation for a new knowledge article, right? Or AI systems that can go in and very easily look at thousands of documents that you have in your knowledge base and discover, oh, you've got 5 copies of the same process. You need to unify those into one, right? So AI is providing tools that allow knowledge management practitioners to very quickly and very efficiently and in a very focused manner be able to improve the quality of the knowledge that they're managing, right? So it's not just about the process of AI sharing knowledge. It's using those AI tools to manage that knowledge, and using those AI tools in a way that before took hours and hours of manual effort to do. I can't begin to tell you how many hours that I used to spend looking at our knowledge base and trying to figure out, okay, well, it seems like these might be duplicate articles. I don't know. Let's find out. Let's get an expert to look at these and tell us, right? Now with the AI, it can happen in seconds, right? And then you have that, and then you don't let the AI do it on their own. you have that human element in there. You bring it to the human and say, hey, AI says, hey, human, I think this is, a duplicate. And then the human is able to say, yeah, it is. Or, actually, no, we just need to word things maybe a little bit differently to make sure that it's really clear that these are different types of processes, right? So I think knowledge management is poised to become a really crucial success factor for CX organizations in the next 3 years.
That's amazing. Well, listen, Martin, I've enjoyed today's conversation. And to our listeners, I want you to like, subscribe, and comment on what you've heard. In this podcast, we like to bring you different views of customer experience. And knowledge management has often been that unsung hero that helps unify the experience by ensuring that information gets to the right individuals at the right time and it's correct. So once again, my name is JP Dumas. I've had Martin Hobratschk on today, who's been able to share an amazing story of why knowledge management matters, particularly in the age of AI. And thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.